She bought the old garage for just $200, cracked floors, leaking roof, and walls barely holding together. Locals laughed, saying she'd wasted her savings on a pile of junk. But when Marley Reeves started clearing the dust and rubble, her shovel hit something metallic. What she uncovered beneath the concrete would rewrite local history and turn the town's laughter into stunned silence. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world you're watching from. And if stories about second chances, hidden treasures, and unexpected twists spark something in you, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's story will leave you just as speechless. The for sale sign had been hanging crooked for so long that moss had begun to grow over the corners. Marley Reeves stood at the edge of the cracked lot, boots sunk in gravel, hands shoved deep into her jacket pockets. The old garage sat hunched at the end of the lane roof, sagging, windows clouded with grime, the ghost of an old sign above the door that once read Reeves Auto and Machine. Most people saw a wreck. She saw a chance, even if it was just a foolish one. $200. That's what the county auction listed it for. Less than what she'd spent last month on fuel. Less than the cost of the dreams she'd stopped chasing. When she handed over the cash to the county clerk, he'd raised an eyebrow. "You sure, miss? That place has been condemned twice. No electricity, no plumbing, and the back walls half caved in." Marley had only smiled faintly. "I'll take my chances." He shook his head like she'd just signed up for a bad joke. The truth was, she wasn't sure why she wanted it. Maybe it was the faded memory of her father's hands covered in grease, the smell of oil and steel that used to fill her childhood. Maybe she just wanted something of her own, something broken she could fix. The first time she stepped inside, the air felt heavy, like stepping into a memory that didn't belong to her. Dust hung thick, catching in the beams of afternoon light cutting through holes in the roof. Shelves lined the walls, their contents long-forgotten jars of bolts, rusted wrenches, an old tin of coffee with nails inside instead of grounds. The floor was a patchwork of stains and cracks, like veins of time spreading outward. Every sound echoed the creak of the rafters, the crunch beneath her boots, the distant hum of traffic that had long stopped caring this place existed. Marley spent the first day sweeping, though she knew it was hopeless. Each stroke of the broom stirred up ghosts, not progress. Under the corner workbench, she found a set of keys so old their tags had disintegrated. She smiled to herself, pocketed them, and kept working. She imagined what kind of cars had rolled through these doors 50 years ago. Chevys, Pontiacs, maybe something rarer. The town of Oak Ridge had once been a mechanic's haven, back when people still fixed engines instead of replacing them. But those days were gone, and so were the people who lived them. By sunset, she stood in the doorway, watching dust swirl in golden light. The building was silent, but it didn't feel empty. Somewhere, deep in the concrete, beneath the years of oil and neglect, there was a hum she couldn't explain, faint, rhythmic, like something alive was buried there. Marley knelt down and pressed her hand against the cracked floor. It was cool to the touch, but steady, solid. "You've still got a story in you," she whispered. And maybe, she thought, so did she. By the third morning, Marley's arms ached from scrubbing, hauling, and sweeping, but she didn't mind. There was something honest about exhaustion that came from work, the kind that didn't ask for applause. The garage smelled faintly cleaner now, though the air still carried the musk of oil and rust. A single ray of light cut through a crack in the roof and landed near the center of the floor, right where the largest split in the concrete began. She'd noticed it before a jagged line stretching nearly 10 feet from the workbench to the center drain. But this morning, it caught her differently. The edges were too straight, too deliberate, as if the break wasn't from age, but from intention. Marley knelt beside it, running her fingers across the line. The edges were clean, almost sharp beneath the dust. She frowned, brushing away loose grit until she found what looked like the corner of a metal hinge embedded in the floor. It was barely visible, a small, rectangular plate flush with the concrete, the kind of thing someone would only see if they were looking for it. She tapped it lightly with a wrench. It made a dull, hollow sound. There was something beneath. The thought made her pulse quicken. She sat back on her heels, chewing the inside of her lip. Whoever owned this garage before her must have sealed it for a reason. Maybe it was a pit, or an old storage compartment. Maybe nothing at all. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that this place had been hiding something long before she showed up. That afternoon, she called her friend Daryl from the scrapyard to help her patch the back wall. He was twice her age and had a laugh that could echo through an empty barn. "So this is the famous $200 palace," he teased, stepping inside. "Smells like ambition and mildew," Marley grinned. "Mostly mildew." As they worked, she caught herself glancing back toward the crack every few minutes, like it was watching her. When Daryl finally left at sundown, the garage fell silent again. Marley stood alone under the hanging bulb she'd rigged up from an old extension cord, staring at the line that cut through her new floor like a scar. Her instincts whispered for her to leave it, fix the roof first, get the walls secure, deal with the rest later. But her curiosity had always been louder than her patience. She fetched a hammer and chisel from the tool shelf. Each strike echoed sharp and hollow, the sound bouncing off the walls. Small chips of concrete scattered around her boots. Beneath the thin surface layer, the tone deepened not the solid thud of foundation, but the hollow resonance of space. Her hands trembled slightly as she widened the gap. The smell that rose up was old earth, oil, and time. She sat back, sweat streaking her neck, heart pounding. There was definitely something down there, something metal. And for the first time since she bought the place, Marley Reeves wasn't thinking about the money she'd spent. She was thinking about the secret she might have just bought instead. By sunrise, Marley was already back at the garage, coffee in hand, determination in her eyes. Sleep had been impossible. Every time she closed them, she saw that faint metallic gleam beneath the cracked floor. The morning air was cold enough to fog her breath, but she didn't care. She rolled up her sleeves, set her tools beside the crack, and began again. Each hammer strike sent vibrations up her arms, the sound sharp against the stillness. The concrete broke easier than she expected, like it wanted to let go. Dust filled the air in soft clouds, settling on her hair and skin until she looked like a ghost digging through time. After an hour, her chisel hit something solid, not concrete, not rock, but smooth steel. She froze. The metallic clang reverberated through the slab like a whisper from below. She brushed away the debris, revealing the faint curve of a surface, rounded, deliberate, unmistakably shaped by human hands. Marley's pulse quickened. She cleared more of it, revealing a line, then another. Slowly, the outline formed the edge of a fender, curved and elegant, buried beneath the floor. She sat back on her heels, staring at it in disbelief. "No way," she whispered. The idea was insane. Who buries a car? And why here? She'd heard stories of gang stashes, insurance fraud, old smuggling routes. But this wasn't the city. This was Oak Ridge, a town where the wildest crime in decades was a stolen lawnmower. Marley grabbed her phone, thinking to call Daryl, then hesitated. No, not yet. This was hers for now. Her discovery, her mystery. She kept digging, clearing section after section, tracing the lines of what looked to be an entire vehicle entombed in the concrete. By noon, she'd exposed enough to see the shimmer of faded red paint beneath the dust. The color was faint, dulled by years of neglect, but it still caught the light like embers under ash. She reached for her flashlight and leaned close. There was something hauntingly graceful about the shape, low, sleek, designed not for utility, but for beauty. The kind of car built when craftsmanship was art. Her breath hitched when she brushed her hand along the emblem on the hood. The badge was barely visible, worn down by time, but the outline of it sent a jolt through her chest. A rearing horse. She didn't believe it at first. It couldn't be. Her mind scrambled through possibilities, kit, car, replica, coincidence, anything to make it ordinary. But even beneath the layers of grime, the proportions were unmistakable. The hood length, the curves, the perfection of symmetry. She knew what she was looking at. Marley sat there on the cold floor, heart pounding in her throat, staring at the buried relic half swallowed by concrete. A Ferrari, or at least what looked like one. And not just any Ferrari, something older, rarer, impossibly out of place. She whispered to herself, voice shaking. What the hell happened here? Whatever it was, she knew one thing for certain. Her $200 gamble had just become the biggest discovery of her life. Marley barely noticed the sun dipping low through the broken windows. Hours had passed, yet she couldn't stop. Her hands were blistered, her knees bruised from kneeling on cold cement. But she kept chipping, brushing, uncovering. Each layer of dust and rubble peeled back decades of silence. By evening, the shape beneath her floor had taken form a complete body, sleek and unmistakably Italian. The roofline was low, the hood long and muscular, the kind of design that existed only when performance was worshipped as art. When she finally cleared enough to expose the hood fully, she wiped away the grime with her sleeve. That's when she saw it, the faint, embossed outline of a rearing horse caught in a beam of fading sunlight. For a moment, Marley forgot how to breathe. She'd seen that symbol 1,000 times, on posters, calendars, and glossy magazines that she could never afford. The prancing horse Cavallino Rampante. Ferrari. She leaned closer, her fingers tracing the emblem's edges like it was sacred. The paint beneath it was red, not the dull red of rust or primer, but the deep, romantic hue that only Ferrari called Rosso Corsa. It shimmered even under layers of grime, like a pulse still beating after decades underground. Marley sat back, heart pounding. The absurdity of it crashed over her in waves. A Ferrari. In her floor. In a condemned garage she bought for $200. She laughed out loud, a sharp, disbelieving sound that bounced off the walls. "This can't be real," she whispered. But the metal under her hand said otherwise. As night fell, she rigged a work light over the site and snapped photos from every angle. The frame, the lines, the emblem, it all matched. It wasn't just a Ferrari. It was a classic. Maybe even a 1,960 seconds, 250 series, the kind that sold for millions at auctions she used to stream online just to dream. But this one wasn't polished or celebrated. It was buried. Hidden deliberately. Marley's thoughts spiraled. Who would bury a car like this? The old garage records had no mention of a Ferrari ever serviced here. She checked the walls for clues, searching for any trace of documentation, but found nothing. Only silence and the smell of old oil. By midnight, she sat on the floor beside the car, hands black with dust, exhaustion creeping in. The town's laughter from a few days ago echoed in her memory. $200? You could have bought yourself a decent toolbox instead. She smiled faintly. If they could see this now. She reached out and touched the hood again, her fingertips gliding over the cold steel. It felt alive, not mechanical, but personal, like the car itself had been waiting for someone to find it, the kind of secret that refused to stay buried forever. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the broken doorframe like a breath from the past. Marley whispered softly into the dark. "Who hid you here? And why?" The Ferrari said nothing. But in the quiet hum of the garage, it felt like history was holding its breath. Marley didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old garage sounded like a whisper, every gust of wind like the breath of someone watching. By dawn, she was back with a crowbar and flashlight, determined to uncover more of the car. The concrete around the edges gave way slowly, revealing one detail after another. Chrome accents dulled by time, leather seats eaten by mold, a steering wheel still intact beneath a thick layer of dust. Every inch she freed felt like exhuming a memory that refused to die. As she cleared near the rear wheel well, something caught her attention, a folded corner of paper wedged between the frame and the wall. She carefully pried it out. It was an old envelope, brittle and yellowed, the edges flaking at her touch. On the front, faint handwriting read, "Property of R. Grayson, Oak Ridge Auto." Marley frowned. She'd seen that name before. The faded sign out front before it belonged to the Reeves family had once read Grayson's Garage. She brushed the dust from the envelope and opened it carefully. Inside were several receipts, all dated between 1,969 and 1,972 invoices for imported parts, written in Italian, stamped with the Ferrari logo. But there was more. A photograph. Black and white. It showed a young man in grease-stained overalls standing beside the very same car, pristine and gleaming, the sunlight catching on its polished hood. Behind him, a woman leaned against the garage door, smiling. The handwriting on the back read, "Me and Eleanor, summer 71. Marley turned the photo over in her hands, her mind racing. R. Grayson, the original owner of the garage. She vaguely remembered her father mentioning him once, a man who disappeared mysteriously decades ago. Some said he went bankrupt and fled town. Others said he died in a fire. No one really knew. But now, standing in the remnants of his workshop, she could feel the truth humming beneath the surface. She spent the next few hours searching the office. The small back room was lined with metal filing cabinets, most of them rusted shut. She pried one open and found stacks of ledgers, work orders, and handwritten notes. In the bottom drawer, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small wooden box, inside a set of car keys with a faded leather fob shaped like a horse's head. The Ferrari's keys. Marley's breath caught. She turned them over in her hand, the metal cool and perfectly balanced, engraved faintly with the number 250 GT. Her heart skipped. That model name was legendary, one of Ferrari's most coveted. She sat down at the old desk, the keys clutched tight, and stared at the car buried just beyond the wall. The pieces were forming a picture, a man, a woman, a dream, and a secret that never made it to daylight. Whatever happened here, it wasn't an accident. Someone buried this car for a reason. And Marley Reeves, the town's fool with her $200 gamble, had just stumbled into a story that had been waiting half a century to be told. By the next morning, the story of Marley's find had already started to leak. Daryl must have mentioned something at the scrapyard, because by noon 2 locals stopped by, just to see how the cleanup was going. They didn't say it outright, but Marley could see the curiosity in their eyes. She brushed them off politely, locking the garage after they left. Some discoveries weren't meant for gossip yet, not until she understood what she'd uncovered. She spread everything out on the old workbench, the receipts, the photograph, the keys. Each piece felt like a breadcrumb from a life frozen in time. She searched the name R. Grayson online, but the results were sparse old property records, a single mention in a 1971 newspaper clipping about a local car show, and then nothing, as if the man had been erased. But in that photo, he looked alive, proud, content, standing beside the Ferrari like it was more than a car. It was a statement. Marley stared at the woman in the photo, Eleanor. There was tenderness in the way she leaned against the doorframe, her smile aimed at the man, not the camera. Maybe she was his wife. Or maybe she was something more complicated. Marley wondered what happened to her if she stayed in Oak Ridge. If she knew what became of the car. She found herself tracing Eleanor's face with her thumb, the way you might when looking at a ghost you wished you'd known. By late afternoon, she began carefully clearing around the front of the Ferrari, intent on freeing the engine bay. As she worked, the hum of the garage seemed to grow that low, reverberating energy that made her feel less alone. When her chisel finally broke through a thick patch of cement near the hood latch, a gust of stale air escaped, carrying the scent of metal and oil. Inside the gap, she saw a glint of brass, a small plaque riveted to the frame. She leaned in close and read the engraving. Ferrari, 250 GT Lusso, chassis number 4465 GT. Marley's heart nearly stopped. That model had been one of Enzo Ferrari's masterpieces, elegant, limited, each one handcrafted. Only a few hundred ever built. She remembered reading about one that vanished in the early 70s from a private collection after a mysterious fire. A rumor, a legend. Could this be it? She sat down on the cold floor, dust streaking her jeans, her palms trembling. She wasn't just uncovering metal. She was unearthing a story buried beneath grief, time, and secrecy. Somewhere, someone had loved this car enough to hide it, rather than see it destroyed. That night, Marley stood outside the garage, the stars faint above the dark horizon. The building behind her felt less like a ruin now, and more like a monument. Her father used to say that every machine had a memory, that if you listened closely, it would tell you its story. She closed her eyes, letting the night air fill her lungs. For the first time in years, she felt that truth. The Ferrari hadn't been buried to be forgotten. It had been buried to be protected. And now, it had chosen her to bring its memory back to light. The following week blurred into a rhythm Marley hadn't felt in years, the kind of rhythm that comes when purpose replaces doubt. Every morning she unlocked the garage before sunrise, coffee steaming on the workbench, dust hanging in golden light. The Ferrari sat half-exposed now, its red shell streaked with gray from the concrete dust, like an artifact refusing to stay buried. Each bolt she loosened, each inch of paint she uncovered, made her feel like she was shaking hands with history itself. Word of her discovery spread fast this time. She didn't confirm anything, but the sight of her working long hours drew attention. Daryl showed up one morning, carrying a set of industrial jacks. "If you're serious about freeing her," he said, "you'll need better leverage." He didn't ask what her was. He didn't need to. Men like Daryl didn't come around for curiosity, they came for faith. Together, they chipped away the last of the concrete along the car's frame, sweat pooling on the cracked floor, metal groaning as air touched it for the first time in decades. When the final slab broke free, the sound echoed like a sigh, the kind of release that carried years of silence with it. The Ferrari's shape stood fully revealed now, its elegant body marred but still defiant. Under the hood, the V12 engine sat frozen in dust, the once silver manifolds now tarnished to a dull pewter. Marley ran her hand along the intake, feeling the cold, unyielding metal beneath her palm. "You've been sleeping a long time," she murmured. Daryl glanced at her and smiled. "Then let's wake her up." They spent days documenting every inch before attempting any restoration. Marley treated it like a sacred ritual, photographing serial numbers, cataloging parts, taking notes in the same careful handwriting her father had used in his shop ledgers. At night, she'd sit at her small kitchen table, poring over old car magazines and schematics, tracing her finger along every curve that matched what she'd found. One evening, while cleaning the passenger floorboard, she discovered something wedged beneath the seat rails, a small metal tin sealed with electrical tape. Her pulse quickened. She peeled it open carefully. Inside, folded in half, was another photograph. The same man and woman as before, only this time they stood beside a different car, one engulfed in smoke, firefighters in the background. Scrawled on the back, in the same familiar handwriting, were the words, "Some things are worth saving." Marley sat there in stunned silence. The puzzle was becoming clearer. The fire, the disappearance, the burial. This Ferrari had survived something, and whoever hid it did so out of love, not crime. That night, she turned off the lights and stood before the car in silence. Its crimson frame gleamed faintly under the hanging bulb, like an ember refusing to die out. "You made it through hell," she whispered. "Now let's bring you back." And for the first time since her father's death, Marley felt something stir inside her, not just hope, but belonging. The kind that comes when you realize some dreams are meant to be rebuilt, no matter how deep they've been buried. By the end of the month, Marley had transformed the once-dead garage into a living workshop. The floors were swept, the tools organized, the scent of solvent and new beginnings hanging in the air. The Ferrari, now fully unearthed, sat on stands like a relic under restoration, its frame gleaming under steady work lights. Marley had cleaned the engine block by hand, tracing every serial mark as if memorizing its heartbeat. Each day, she grew more attached to the car, not for its value, but for its story. One afternoon, she was adjusting the distributor cap when the creak of the garage door made her look up. A man stood in the doorway, silhouetted by sunlight. He was tall, maybe late 60s, his posture straight but his eyes tired. In one hand, he held a folded newspaper. In the other, a photograph. "You're Marley Reeves?" he asked, voice rough from age or emotion she couldn't tell. She wiped her hands on a rag and nodded. "That's me. Can I help you?" He stepped closer, eyes scanning the car like it was a ghost. "You already have," he said quietly. He held out the photo. It was the same one she'd found the young man in overalls, the woman by the garage, only this version wasn't worn or faded. It was crisp, well kept. "My name's Walter Grayson," he said. "Richard Grayson was my father." Marley's breath caught. The name hit her like a jolt. "You're his son?" He nodded slowly, gaze never leaving the car. "I didn't think I'd ever see her again. I heard rumors years ago that the old shop still stood. Didn't believe it." He ran his hand along the fender, eyes glistening. He loved this car. Said it was the purest thing he ever built. But after the fire, everything changed. Marley leaned against the workbench, listening as he spoke. Walter told her how, in 1972, the garage had caught fire during a neighboring warehouse explosion. Most of the damage was contained, but the Ferrari, still under restoration, was nearly lost. His father spent months trying to repair it, but insurance investigations, debt, and grief had crushed him. "Mom passed that same winter," Walter said softly. "After that, he wasn't the same. One night, he just left. I was 17. Marley's eyes drifted to the buried concrete outline that once covered the car. "He hid it," she said quietly. Walter nodded. He couldn't bear to let it go. Said it held everything he loved: his craft, his marriage, his mistakes. He buried it himself before the bank repossessed the property. Said one day, someone would find it and finish what he couldn't. The silence that followed was thick with memory. Walter turned to Marley, his voice steady now. "Looks like that someone's you." Marley didn't know what to say. She simply nodded, her throat tight. Walter smiled faintly, brushing dust from the hood. "You brought back my father's ghost," he whispered, "and I think he's been waiting for you." The first time the Ferrari's engine turned over, it didn't roar, it exhaled. A slow, trembling cough that sounded more like relief than noise. Marley stood frozen, her hands hovering above the open hood, heart hammering as if the car itself shared her pulse. The old V12 coughed, once, twice, then caught, idling unevenly, smoke curling through the open bay doors like a ghost finding its way home. Walter stood beside her, eyes wide, tears slipping down lines carved deep by time. He'd come every day since that first visit, helping when he could, mostly watching. The two had settled into a quiet partnership, her youth and determination bridging the years his father's silence had left behind. "She remembers," Walter said softly, voice breaking over the hum. "I can't believe she remembers." Marley smiled, wiping grease from her cheek. "She never forgot," she said. She was just waiting for someone to listen. The days that followed became a rhythm of restoration and rediscovery. Marley polished chrome until it gleamed, stitched new leather over the worn seats, and carefully matched the original Rosso Corsa hue from the flakes she'd found hidden beneath the trim. Walter spent hours digging through his father's old notebooks, bringing her diagrams and notes he'd saved as a boy. Together, they pieced the car's soul back together. One evening, as twilight poured through the high windows, Marley asked the question that had been lingering since the day they met. "Why do you think he buried it instead of finishing it?" Walter hesitated, hands steadying on the fender. "My father built engines for a living," he said quietly. "But after Mom died, he didn't have the heart to finish this one. He said some things should stay unfinished, if finishing them means letting go." He looked at her then, eyes glassy but kind. "You gave him that closure, even if he's not here to see it." Marley didn't answer. She didn't need to. The sound of the idling engine filled the silence between them, steady now, sure, alive. The car no longer looked like a relic, but a resurrection. It gleamed under the soft garage lights, the red paint glowing like it carried a heartbeat. When the test drive day finally came, the entire town seemed to know. Daryl showed up with a thermos of coffee. A few of the old locals lingered by the fence, pretending not to stare. Marley slipped into the driver's seat, fingers trembling as they gripped the worn leather wheel. Walter settled beside her, his father's key still dangling from the ignition. She turned it once, and the engine answered with a sound that silenced everything else. No one spoke, no one moved. It was as if time had folded in on itself, the past and present sharing a single breath. Marley looked at Walter and smiled. "Ready?" He nodded. He would have wanted this. She eased the car into gear, the tires rolling forward for the first time in 50 years. And as they crossed the threshold of the garage, the echo of the engine lingered behind them, steady, alive, and full of memory. The morning of the unveiling dawned cool and clear, sunlight spilling through the garage windows like the beginning of a new chapter. Marley stood outside, watching the light catch the red curves of the Ferrari as it idled softly in the doorway. Its surface reflected everything: the trees, the sky, even her own astonished face. The same townspeople who had once laughed at her stood along the street now, their jokes replaced with quiet awe. Some clapped, some just watched. None spoke. Walter stood beside her, dressed in his father's old leather jacket. The keys rested in his hand, the metal glinting in the light. He turned to Marley and said softly, "You gave him peace. You gave me peace." Marley shook her head. "I didn't give you anything," she said. "Your father just left a story that needed someone to listen." He smiled, eyes glistening. "Then you were the right person to hear it." She looked at the car. The Rosso Corsa paint glowed like a heartbeat, every polished surface a reflection of effort, loss, and love. She'd restored more than a machine. She'd revived a dream that had been buried beneath grief and concrete. When she slipped into the driver's seat, the smell of new leather and oil mixed with something older, something sacred. The steering wheel felt like an old handshake, a promise renewed. Walter settled into the passenger side, resting his hand on the dash. Marley turned the key, and the Ferrari responded instantly, purring with the low, resonant hum of memory reborn. They drove through Oak Ridge in silence at first. The streets were lined with familiar faces: the grocer, the postman, Daryl, waving proudly from his truck. Kids ran alongside the curb, cheering, their laughter echoing against the buildings. Marley caught glimpses of disbelief and admiration in every reflection they passed. The same town that once saw her as foolish now saw her as something else, not lucky, but resolute. Someone who'd seen worth where no one else had looked. Outside town, the road opened into rolling countryside. Marley pressed gently on the accelerator, and the Ferrari responded with a graceful surge, the wind rushing through the open windows. The engine's song filled the morning, not loud, not showy, but pure. The kind of sound that could make even silence lean in to listen. Walter turned to her, eyes closed, smiling into the wind. "I think he's here," he said. Marley nodded, her voice soft. "I know." They drove for miles, the horizon unfolding in front of them like a promise kept. And when they finally stopped at the edge of the old county overlook, Marley cut the engine and stepped out, letting the quiet settle around them. The world seemed to exhale. She turned back to look at the car one last time, gleaming, alive, eternal. The red ghost no longer buried, no longer forgotten. Just free. Sometimes, she thought, the things we dig up aren't meant to remind us of what's gone. They're meant to show us what still lives within us, the courage to rebuild, the grace to begin again. As the wind moved through the pines, Marley smiled. She didn't hear laughter anymore. Only the sound of an engine's memory, still running, still faithful, still hers.